Well, welcome to the Studio Steele podcast, the show where we talk about dumb things but also like issues of faith.
We just talk about Steele here.
Yes,
it's a various
there's like
podcast.
different types of grade.
Yeah.
Of steel.
We also talk about stealing.
Pittsburgh.
Welcome to the Steele podcast, where we just talk about steel and stealing steel.
Ooh. Yeah.
Ooh.
We don't recommend that, but if we were to do that,
Profit.
Yeah. Exactly.
This podcast can come out and like 3 days later, like someone's gonna steal a bunch of steel from Pittsburgh, and then we're gonna get blamed for this.
We're gonna get that's all gonna be on us.
Yeah. You can start fresh if you want.
Like in a different, like we'll be on the lam.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd be great.
Yeah.
Try to do podcast. I'll wear a hat. You get a hair swoop. No difference.
Speaking of being on the lam, there was a book and a character called the book and the movie, they were called The Fugitive.
Oh.
And this innocent character, I think his name is Richard Kimball in the movie. He's on the lam.
Ooh.
I've never read the book, but I've watched the movie. But that brings up the point. Like, I have watched movies and read the book.
Mm.
And there's always kind of like a debate. I'm like, well, which was the better portrayal, the imagination of the mind, or what?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have like an
Hold on a second.
Okay.
Just keep the camera running, okay?
He just starts this podcast and then runs away and doesn't come back. I'm a firm believer that the book is always better than the movie. I don't know how to... Is he coming back? I don't know what's going on. Yeah. He just left. I don't know where he went. I don't know what's happening. I believe that, at least I'm not the kind of person who's like, you have to read the book in order to be happy, because I know there are some people out there where they can't actually enjoy...
Okay, stop talking.
You're gonna have to cut all of that, because I broke character like 9 times.
Stop talking.
Did you grab lunch?
Stop talking. Stop talking. A few weeks ago, we were talking about, like, can you put pineapple on a pizza? And Ryan is team, like, yes on that.
Yeah, for sure.
On that disgusting concept of putting pineapple on a pizza. Then we were joking around, like,
sorry.
Well, would you put peach on a pizza?
Yeah, I think it'd be
so
great.
I made a peach and ham pizza that I'm giving to Ryan.
Is it
here.
warm or is it just cold?
Oh, it's been microwaved.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
they wanted me to try this live on air?
yes. So I would like you to try it, because you said you would eat a peach
smells
and ham
interesting.
pizza.
It's floppy.
So we are trying this out.
This is, like, I can't hold this.
Well,
It is liquid.
it got nuked a little
It
bit.
got a little bit too nuked.
Yeah. I may have to cut some of this.
Is this the start of our ASMR podcast, or are we going to start doing mouth noises?
No,
and
Ryan, we're still never doing that. But you have to try this, because you were on team pineapple on pizza, so why not put a peach on it? So roll the peaches around.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, this is called a Peachza. And I can't take credit for it. My 4-year-old somehow came up with that name. I guess he gets the puns after his father. So
There's so much cheese.
yeah, that's the way a pizza should be.
That's fantastic. Run away again. Honestly, it's not bad. Like, it's actually pretty good. You don't really taste too much of the peach. It's more so like you take a bite and then the peach just kind of like dissolves in your mouth. So it's not as like acidic as a pineapple would be. I would eat this. Like, it's pretty good. Do you want some?
I did have some the other night.
What do you
so.
think?
Yeah, I'd probably agree with what you
Like,
said.
it's good.
So,
Like, I'm not saying this is like the newest thing.
I mean, it should be.
It should be.
Try it at home.
It's actually pretty good.
So there you go. Would you eat a peach and ham pizza?
I suggest go do it. Try it.
And he did it.
Join the party.
So let us know if you do that. But right, we're going through the D6 curriculum.
Yes, we are.
We did some Old Testament stuff. We're into the New Testament now, and we're looking at Jesus. And I guess that's something that we should always be doing. But in the curriculum, we got to John 13.
Sorry, I have cheese all in my mouth.
This is gonna look great. But we're looking at John 13. And this is where Jesus baptizes his disciples' feet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did he call it baptizing his disciples' feet?
Oh, no.
Sure
washing
his feet,
washing,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
So, goodness.
I want to make sure it was on the same.
Yeah, I saw the shock on your face. Yeah, so he washes his disciples' feet. So, they're preparing to celebrate the Passover feast, which is like a big deal in Jewish culture, and it reminds them about what God rescued them from when they were in Egypt, and it would be something that Jesus adopts as he looks at to rescue the whole world, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're preparing for this meal, and Jesus gets down and he starts washing the disciples' feet, right? And like all the disciples are like, what's going on? You could hear a pin drop, or because they're just shocked, because typically this would be done by like a servant or a slave, or certainly not someone in Jesus' position who was like a revered and respected rabbi, right? A teacher. And like feet were gross, and I mean
feet
are
gross,
gross, right? Like they've continued to be gross, but like think about what was going on back then, where like you're just in sandals,
walking everywhere.
You may have like stepped in like ox dung or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Just like feet, and then like you're not like sitting at a table. Like typically they would be like sitting on the floor, like reclining,
right?
And so you're kind of a lot closer to each other's feet. But so Jesus starts doing this. He starts doing something that is beneath him, right? And his disciples are shocked.
Yeah.
Peter is like, like, you're not gonna wash my feet.
He had that sass voice.
Yeah,
too,
I could see Peter having that sass.
I actually could see Peter doing that too.
Peter has that kind of temperament, but he's like Jesus, like I'm not gonna let you do this, and Jesus basically says like, if I don't do this for you, then you can have no part of me, right? And then he tells his disciples that this is an example that they are supposed to follow, right, and that they should adopt.
And I think it's important because it's not just the disciples. Sorry, I still have cheese in my mouth and I can feel it. Surprise! I think it's important that it's not just the disciples that are being told to follow this example. This is also an example that we today should be following. Mm-hmm. It's a significant event, and it was weird to think. Imagine for the disciples just to see their rabbi, the person that they were following, just be like, "I'm going to go wash your feet now." But that's just the ultimate example of what humility is. Mm-hmm. I think it's also kind of cool to think, because that parallels what Jesus was about to do a few days later on the cross, where he was able to step down to the lowest of lows to make that sacrifice for everyone else who couldn't.
Right. It was very much sort of like a practical example of what to do, right? Like no one's left worrying like, oh, like how do I express this, right? But then on top of that, it's also sort of like a picture of what Jesus would ultimately be doing, right? And he's kind of like, in this part of the story, he's definitely like setting up and prepping his disciples for what is about to happen in his crucifixion, right? So they can kind of go back and be like, oh, like Jesus was serving all of humanity through the ultimate sacrifice, right? By his death, his sacrificial death on the cross, right? And it would be something that totally turns like the systems of power upside down. At this time, you're especially if you're in Israel, you're in the shadow of an empire, right? You're a part of the have-nots in a system that uses power to dominate,
Yeah.
right? And this little example of like, you know, stepping down from what you think you deserve, and not sort of like pining to be elevated, sets this whole power system upside down. Completely revolutionary, right?
Yeah. And that was essentially what Jesus did throughout all of his ministry.
Mm-hmm.
He had that, I want to say heir to him, but like that's a wrong connotation, but in everything that he did, he had this humility as well, which I thought was insane. Especially given when we were looking through this podcast idea and we were starting to look through, okay, humility. What is humility? How can we talk about this? So one of the first things we did, as many of you who have written a paper have done, is you go to Google and you go to the definition of the word. Mm-hmm. And when we were looking through this definition, the thesaurus of just what humility means, we found that everything seemed to have this connotation of like shy, meek, sheepish, like lack of power. Like it was this like they are the lowest of the low by showing humility, but that's so contradictory to what Jesus did, because he showed humility, but it wasn't because he was shy, it wasn't because he was meek, it wasn't because he was sheepish. It was he had the power. Mm-hmm. He had all of the power. He could have done any of this.
I've got the power. Yeah, totally right. Like he, at any point in time, like Jesus could have like seized his power, right? Yeah. Like, you know, in the passion scene, we have this like, he said he would save everybody, but he couldn't even save himself. Mm-hmm. And it's like, but that wasn't even close to true, right? Yeah. He was still holding the cosmos together, mm-hmm. you know, with his power, giving the power of life to the very people who were mocking him, right? And so at no point in this story, like, was he like devoid of his power, right? Like he maintained it and yet set it aside to save humanity. One of the things that kind of, you know, when we're kind of like summarizing like how Jesus did this, I always look to like Paul's description in Philippians. I'm just going to pull that up and read that here. So in Philippians 2, starting in verse 5, it says, your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. And then it kind of goes into this this poem that the early Christians would have been reciting, or this hymn. And it says, who, being in very nature God, so he had the power, right, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross, right? So like that hymn right there is just like, is describing Christ's humility and describing how that should be modeled in our life as well, right? Like Jesus wasn't trying to like power grasp, right? Like even though he had the power, right? I'm thinking, I'm trying to remember like how I've heard this, but I think it describes humility too, right? Like humility is power restrained, right? So even though you have the power to destroy your enemies and become, you know, like the best, like you restrain that for the benefit of those around you, right?
And with all that being said, with all the descriptions of Jesus' humility, I guess the next question that we need to ask is, how does that apply to our lives? Because we don't have the power over life and death. We don't have the ability to do all those things Jesus did.
Yeah.
How do we follow in that situation? Mm-hmm. And I think the first thing is just looking at what humility is and how you can show humility in the first place. And the way I think that's often seen is through service. You look through the way that Jesus showed humility, he went and he washed the disciples' feet. He did something for others. Mm-hmm. And I think the first step for showing humility is to look around you and to find who it is that's struggling around you and take some time. Be willing to help. Be willing to step down. Be willing to maybe just take yourself off that pedestal that you're putting yourself on. Let go of that status that you have. Let go of what you have to help those who may not have it.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier. You were talking about um, how this becomes sort of like a presence about you. Um, so what was that about?
Oh, I think when it comes to humility, at least for me, I think that it's often easy for people to see it as like a checklist. It's very easy for people to say, okay, if I want to be humble, if I want to live a life of humility, I have to go and find people to serve. I have to be willing to help those who can't help themselves. Look around me, like it almost becomes like if I do this and this and this and this, I'm humble. But I think more than that, humility it's a mindset. It's a way of life. It kind of ties back to what we were talking about last week, where it was a matter of just living your life in a certain way. I think that you have to live your life showing humility in everything. It's not just enough to do the act. It's not enough to say, I went out to Hope Mission. I went out to a soup kitchen on Thursday. I helped there for 2 hours, and boom, now I'm humble. I was able to help those less fortunate than me. I think it's a matter of like living your life with this mindset, and I get that. That's a lot of Christianese. It's a lot of like you hear that through church. What does it mean? I think it just means that you're constantly looking for ways to show humility, which again, it's using the name and the definition, but it's looking for opportunities to take yourself off that pedestal. It's looking for opportunities to find places to serve, and not just so you can get the check mark done. It's just, it has to be a way that it becomes second nature for you.
Yeah, it's almost like, I think I've said this before, and I love what you're saying there. It's sort of like, sometimes we view like our faith as sort of like, I have to do these things, and then I will become like accepted by God, or humble, or have integrity, right? And sort of like, you're kind of putting the horse before the cart, right? Or the cart before the horse. I guess that would be.
There you go.
But you want to put the horse before the cart. So in that sense, like you start by like, we've talked about this before, but by like transforming your mindset, right? To adopt like your perspective to how God sees the world, right? And out of that, you will start to live, like you will start to act in a manner obedient to God and to Christ, right? So yeah, I totally like resonate with that. It's not just sort of like getting out there and some sort of like disinterested, like checking the box, like going through the motions, right? But it actually becomes like a part of your character, right? So these actions. So in a very real sense, where we see like what the cross did and like how disruptive it was to like the power systems of this world, is sort of like taking that example and like bringing that to your world, right? So take a look at the power structures in your sphere of influence, right? Like of I guess what you have power over, or where power structures exist in these sort of microcosms or different sections of life, right? And ask like who needs to be served, right? Like in high school, it's like this perfect like microcosm power structure, right? Where you have sort of like popularity and unpopularity, right? You have like bullies and people who are bullied, and you have like the haves and the have-nots, and like that is like a perfect place to kind of like look around and be like, who needs to be served? Like who's lonely? Like who needs to be elevated, right? So that's kind of like a great place to kind of like upend the power structure by serving, right? Like serving people, elevating people, befriending people, building relationships with people, right? And not like these barriers that try and say I'm better than you, or constantly like flip-flopping back and forth like that, right? Too, I think this can extend to work, and so not like bulldozing someone over so that you can get a promotion or something like that, right? Like in society at large, I've been trying to kind of like this adopt Christ's humility as I approach like pandemic measures, right? Like they are restricting, and in some ways, they're hardships that we are enduring, right? But we are enduring them so ultimately so that people don't get sick and die, right? And so trying to to adopt Christ's humility in that aspect. Like, and what about online?
Yeah.
Too. There's power in your words. How can you use your words to elevate people online, right? So those are some areas where I think you can take a look at power structures and say, how am I going to turn this upside down?
Yeah.
And how am I going to elevate people? And how am I going to bring Christ's humility to this? Where it's not just about myself, it's about putting other people first.
Mm-hmm. And I think on the same lines that it's taking account of what it is that you yourself have. Not just a matter of what power exists in just the overarching system itself, but when you often think about humility, it's a matter of, okay, I have something, someone else doesn't have something, let's help the person who doesn't have that something. And it can be very easy to say, well, I have something and this is a bad thing that I have. It's bad that I have it. I have to try and help people that don't.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's important that you recognize what it is that you have.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a position of power. Maybe it's a plethora of different things. I'm using fun words too.
Yeah.
But like recognizing what it is that you have and then finding ways to use those elements. Use what it is that you have to help the other people.
Absolutely right. It is not bad that Christ held the entire cosmos in his hands, right? Like, and think about how vast and big that is, right? That it is not a bad thing that he has it, but look how he used it, right? So, I think that. So when we were kind of like talking about this pocket, you had kind of like thrown out a definition, and I love this, and I think it's something like to kind of end this off with. And so I'm going to quote Ryan White here. So look out, everybody. So you had just thrown out the phrase like be willing to be overlooked. Be willing to be overlooked, and I think that kind of like it extends here, right? Like power grasps and controls and gains, and I think humility just says like, okay, like it's not about me. So there's like, where can I serve? So there you go. Peachza.
Super good.
Try it.
Try it out.
Upend the power structures to serve people. And like, comment, subscribe,
share, notification bell. Not sure how that works, but it's a thing too.
Yeah. You know what? You do the notification bell and tell us how it works.
It has something to do with, it lets them know when we post videos. I haven't done a lot of looking into it, but who knows? Maybe one day.
Yeah. So there you go. There you go. All right. See you guys.
See ya.
Wasn't that like a scientific boat too? Like it was like some
remember.
sort of like scientific
actually?
Research boat. Yeah, like Boating McBoatface is out there like taking scientific readings, and its crew are documenting graphs. As far as I know.
That's fantastic.
I know. I didn't like the way these. Like, how come like some claps can sound amazing, and then other times they just sound like weak?
Can we get like a clapper, like a little like, It's always take one, but that's fine.
I know that is probably the solution to our problem. Though.
We can name the gorilla